Getting threatened for voting for Trump, having your woke professor scold you over your hairstyle, or having your abuser come out as non-binary to get away with it. We're going to talk about all these crazy horror stories you sent in for this episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. On Fridays, we do Voicemail Friday episodes where I take voice notes from you guys and hear about your personal life situations and your woke horror stories and react to them and share them with the audience. The link to send one of those in is in the description, as always, if you want your story to potentially be featured in an upcoming episode. And now, without further ado, let's listen to our first caller who was threatened simply for voting for the President of the United States.
Hi, Brad. My name's Addie. I'm a really big fan of your show, and I wanted to share a story today about something that happened this past election. So this past election, I voted for Trump. I'm a very religious conservative, and that's not really something I keep secret about myself. So I made a post on TikTok about how I had voted for Trump, and it wasn't even really very antagonizing, in my opinion. It was just something kind of stating my views. And I actually got a DM. It was a hate message. It said things like, Jesus would want to watch you burn, and you're horrible, and burn in hell, and just, horrible, like, nasty things. And eventually this person resorted to telling me that that they knew what college I was going to go to. They told me what college I went to, and that somebody was going to be paying me a visit because, quote unquote, rapist supporters don't deserve to live. Obviously, kind of antagonizing me about being religious and everything. So yeah, that's my horror story. I made a police report, but it was kind of wild.
Wow. Well, this person who messaged you on TikTok seems like a real treat. What a honey. What a sweetie. I mean, look, obviously it's scary to receive a message like this, and I am glad that you reported it to the police, although there's not that much they can do. I too have been threatened for different reasons. I didn't support Trump, but a lot of my opinions, offend people, and I've had people send things to my home. I've had people threaten me. It's like, sadly, kind of par for the course if you're a political commentator of any note, but you're just a normal person who simply just expressed your viewpoint online. So that really shouldn't be happening to you. I mean, it shouldn't be happening to anyone, but especially not to you, just exercising your opinion to presumably a pretty small audience. And especially because you said there wasn't even anything particularly antagonistic about your post. Although, even if there was, that wouldn't justify any of this behavior. The upside, though, or at least the positive spin I can put on this, is that 99.9% of the time, these kinds of threats are just from like keyboard warriors who will never do anything in real life. And so it's still scary. I do totally get that, but I don't know that you actually need to be that concerned or that worried. And just block people like this. They're totally unhinged. They've lost the plot. I mean, imagine thinking that half the country basically deserves to die because in a system where you literally only have two options, they chose one that they thought was less bad. And you can talk about Trump's personal foibles. How could anybody vote for somebody who may have abused or harmed women? And I do understand that argument, but I also understand why good-hearted Americans could say, well, look, I think his pro-life policies will save thousands of lives, or I think that we have a national security crisis at our border. So yes, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for him. I don't think that makes you a bad person. We could discuss whether that's right or wrong on a moral, political, strategic level, but I will never accept that that makes someone evil or that they don't have a right to live. That's dangerous and unhinged and dehumanizing rhetoric that takes you to a very dark place. It's also like probably the worst way ever to win support for a side. I mean, I don't know, people like this aren't they the democracy people? Democracy, democracy, democracy. And they take it a little far, but like, we are a country where popular will is how the government is controlled. So presumably, if you are on the left and you wanted Kamala to win or something, and you want Democrats to win in 2026 or 2028, you should be trying to convince Trump supporters, not threatening them. Just my hot take, but people don't typically respond well when you threaten, insult, or demean them. And it's not a great way of winning hearts and minds. Crazy idea. I know that's wild. Anyway, thank you for the voicemail. Hope all is well. Hopefully nothing ever comes from this. But you know what? Honestly, I would encourage you not to back down because that's what they want. So keep speaking your mind, saying your views, and having respectful debates and dialogues. And don't let deranged people on TikTok scare you out of exercising your basic, fundamental, constitutional, and human right to speak your mind and vote for whoever you want. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Do hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Remember, the link to send in one of these is in the description. Please do tell me it doesn't have to be political, but it can be a woke horror story. It can be some far-right craziness you've encountered or a personal dilemma. I'm happy to hear about anything you guys have going on. I want to hear from you. So check out the link in the description to send me a voice note. And now we're going to hear from a teenager whose friend's parents won't let her come over this person's house because their home is unsafe because her parents may have voted for Trump or something. We're going to hear this crazy story after this. American politics is descending into chaos, and it's harder than ever to know what's really happening. The only way to figure out what's actually going on is with Ground News, an amazing service I've used for years that helps me prepare this show. Ground News gathers news from all over the world in one place so you can see what both sides are saying and make up your own mind. It also shows you everything you need to know about a source's bias, factuality, and ownership. The recent protests and riots against immigration enforcement offer an important example of why Ground News is so necessary. Using Ground News, you can see how the left is portraying it, with articles like this one from Vox titled, "Immigration Raids Fuel Protests and Fear in Los Angeles." You can also see how right-wing media is covering it, with this Fox News headline reading, "Coast to Coast, Anti-ICE Chaos Caught on Camera." That's a really striking difference in narratives. And using Ground News, not only can you see how both sides are framing any given story, you can also get a neutral summary, see who's covering it and who's ignoring it, and most importantly, use your critical thinking skills to make up your own mind. You can get the same plan that I use, which is the Vantage subscription, if you sign up through my link, ground.news/Brad, or using the QR code on screen to get 40% off unlimited access, which comes out to about $5 a month. This exclusive discount is available now through this link, so act now to pop your media bubble and keep your critical thinking skills sharp. Okay, let's take a listen to this voicemail from our friend here, who I think is in high school, who had this really crazy experience.
Hi, Brad. I'm Riley. I was recently in a class with my friend A, and I invited her over to my house sometime because she hadn't come over in forever. And I, just told her that she should come over sometime, and she let me know that she would be unable to come over to my house anymore. I pried a little bit and just, asked why, because she lives on my street. We live very close. And she let me know that it was because her mother believes that my house could be unsafe. I come from a more right-leaning household, and there's no really way that it could be considered unsafe. It's just your average household, but I guess that my friend A had told her mom about my family's political views, and they're a very liberal family. And from the information that my friend A gave her, she considered it to be an unsafe household for her daughter to be in. So I don't know how I should proceed. Me and A, we kind of had a bit of a falling out due to political things, because I believe in separating the political from the personal, just it doesn't need to be the same thing, but A doesn't, so politics come up a lot with her, and we don't really agree, so just let me know how to proceed, because I don't know if we should maintain a friendship in this situation.
Wow. So this is not normal. This is like unhinged behavior, particularly from your friend's mother. I have to just first and foremost say that either way, this parent is wrong. But this parent, this mom, this woke mom, who apparently watches too much MSNBC or whatever, she's wrong in one of two ways. Either she's suggesting that it is like emotionally or mentally unsafe for her child to go to a Trump supporting family's home, which I think is wrong because that's not what safety means. The idea that you might encounter a belief or opinion that's not your own is not a threat to your safety. And that's like ridiculous, condescending logic that I totally reject. Or more sinisterly, and I really hope it's not this, but I actually kind of get the vibe that this might be what's happening here. This mom actually thinks that her daughter would be like at risk of harm being done to her, like physically or safety wise at risk in a Trump supporting home. And that is deranged because that's just baseless. Like politics is not a proxy for what person is more likely to like harm your daughter, or what adults can you trust around your children. And what's so sinister about that, in my view, like the correlation does not exist. The math is not mathing there. There are people who vote for Trump, for Biden, for Kamala, whoever, who don't vote at all, who may harm your kids. And you can't, that is not any sort of reliable proxy. And it's just like insulting to people who voted for Trump, because many of them are upstanding Americans and great people in their communities who would never harm a fly. But more importantly, from the parents' perspective, it's actually very important to make sure that especially if you have a teenage daughter, is not put in a situation where they may be harmed or taken advantage of. And so for you to do it in ways that are motivated by your partisan hatred and your tribal ideology, rather than actual facts, statistics, data, actual, criminal background checks, knowing the offenders in your area, or any sort of factual or logical basis, is failing at that purpose of keeping your kids safe. So it's like a betrayal of the most fundamental responsibility a parent has to a child, which I really find contemptible, honestly. And I would find it contemptible in the opposite direction. If a Trump supporting family said, no, I can't let my kids go to a Kamala voting household because that's unsafe, I would find that equally absurd and inaccurate. Now, as for the friend, that is kind of a second question here. Can you still be friends with this person? And I generally think you can be friends with people with very different beliefs. I have people who I consider close friends who are all over the spectrum politically. Some of them who are to my right and love Trump. Some of them who are like very left, like have the politics of Elizabeth Warren. And I do believe generally that you can separate the political from the personal. In this case, though, if this friend of yours has this parent interfering, or in particular, if this parent or this friend can't handle disagreement or coexistence and just like not talking about things that you don't agree on, if that's what you have to do, or calmly, civilly talking about them, then I would say that that's the reason that you may potentially need to just give up on this friendship, not because this friend is liberal or progressive, but because they don't know how to civilly agree to disagree, or simply agree not to talk about certain issues. So that would be a valid reason for not being friends with this person, not the fact that they wanted Kamala to win in 2024 or anything like that. Up next, we're going to hear from somebody whose woke professor lectured them about what haircuts they're allowed to have as a white person. Yes, seriously. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Brad. This is Em, longtime viewer of the show. I just had a quick story, kind of funny, that I thought I would share. Whenever I was going to school, about 2 years ago, I took a critical race theory class at my university, and during that class, my professor thought she would enlighten us and advise that apparently braids are exclusively for indigenous and people of color, and that any white person is not supposed to wear braids, even though there's historical instances of braids being used across the world. Just thought that was a funny one, quick one for you. Hope you're doing well. Have a great one as always.
Well, thank you for the note. And actually, Loki, shout out to you for signing up to take a critical race theory class, even though you knew you were probably going to disagree with a lot of it. I respect that. And I actually really recommend that. I took a gender studies class in college, even though obviously, I knew I was going to disagree with 90% of what they taught, but it was an eye-opening experience for me. And as long as you go into it determined to push back and ask tough questions and not just like gobble up the woke gobbledygook propaganda they're feeding you, I actually think it's an eye-opening experience and that people should not shy away from it. So shout out to you for doing that. But I find this idea laughable. And it's not just this one professor. You will find this in like some corners of woke school discourse, that it is somehow progressive to argue that like certain haircuts are only for certain skin color people. Like that, to me, oh, am I allowed to have this haircut? Better check my flow chart of which races are allowed to have it. Like, in what universe did anyone consider that progress. And you have a point that like white people wore braids in some historical context. To me, it doesn't freaking matter though. Like, I don't accept the premise that you can only wear this hairstyle if your ancestors had this hairstyle in some textbook. No, that's stupid. It's just a hairstyle. Seriously, like, I love this, that this like scholar whose, career is dedicated to anti-racism research and professor, really it's haircuts, babe. We're going with haircuts. That's what's going to keep you up at night. Honestly, it's like, show me on the doll where the haircut hurt you. I just don't accept for a moment that any black people in the world anywhere are actually materially harmed in any way, or that their life is made worse by a white person somewhere wearing braids. And I actually think it's absurd and kind of offensive to the struggles they might actually face to focus on such ridiculous fluff and BS. But yeah, I encounter that kind of thing all the time in college, and that's part of why I made sure to graduate in 3 years rather than 4. I just couldn't handle. I mostly did it to save money, but I couldn't handle too much of it. And apparently, guys, in academia, and this won't come as a shock to me, given the work I'm doing on the Citation Needed podcast with Colin Wright, where we do deep dives into woke academia. I'll link to that in the description. You can go subscribe to our Substack. But this is not really a surprise to me, but apparently wokeness is even infecting the hard sciences like physics. Take a listen.
Hey, Brad. So I wanted to tell you about a funny situation that I experienced recently at a university campus. So I went with my grandmother to a seminar on physics and the arts, and all it had to do with it had nothing to do with physics, honestly. It all had to do with the indigenous ways of thinking and how they're trying to impose themselves into physics. And it's kind of like it made me laugh a lot, because essentially it was, oh, if a tree falls in the forest, does it really make a sound? Well, yes, because nature is there to observe it. Ho ho. And I don't know. I think you and your friend Colin Wright mentioned that a lot of liberals and left leaning people take everything indigenous people and what they have to say for like exactly what they say. And it made me laugh so hard that they had a whole seminar about indigenous beliefs in physics. Like, it's some things are, you don't need to politicize, it's physics. Like, I don't know, maybe you have something to say about that, but I thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, thank you for your message. And I am horrified by this. We talk about this kind of thing a lot on Citation Needed, which is not available on my YouTube channel. You have to go to the Substack to subscribe there to check it out. You can get part of it for free, and then part of it's for paid subscribers. But on this show that I do with Colin Wright, we talk about this kind of thing. And I find it concerning in general, the extent to which this like kind of woke brain rot has infected academia. But when it's in the social sciences, that's bad enough. When it gets into the hard sciences, which we've documented a little bit on Citation Needed and will do more in the future, and the kind of thing this caller talked about, that's when it actually scares me. Because, like, I don't want the people doing physics in America, many of whom may go on to, like, design planes and trains and all this kind of shit I don't understand, but I rely on their expertise to be safe in my everyday life. I don't want them thinking about, well, what would indigenous ways of knowing tell us about this? No, like, what are the facts? What can we observe and confirm to be true? Do science, not activism. Keep it out of the hard sciences. That's not too much to ask. That's like a bare minimum. If you guys want to do that, totally unserious gobbledygook, and like, absolutely, this is not shade to Native Americans or indigenous people or people with that ancestry at all. It's simply to say that, like, science is about discovering truth. And if there's some truth that indigenous people know, that's valid. But this idea that we should, like, instead of just traditional scientific method, also listen to indigenous ways of knowing, as if that's like a factual thing. If it's a factual thing, it's already part of science. If it's not, if it's something else, then it's useless. And we shouldn't be doing it. Not in this domain, at least. Yeah, this kind of thing actually scares me when I encounter this stuff in like the hard sciences or in medicine, which we increasingly encounter a lot, because like this is not gender studies discourse, right? This is not like Marxist feminist journals publishing stupid stuff. This is people who are being trained to work in jobs in fields much more important than mine, right? Where people's lives are actually at stake, not reacting to TikTok videos on YouTube, but like making life and death decisions for patients, designing machines that fly in the sky. Keep the woke crap out of it. That's not too much to ask at all. Up next, we're going to hear from somebody whose family member cheered for Trump to be assassinated. Yes, lovely stuff. Let's take a listen.
Hey Brad, I'm a college student and I hold what I would consider to be relatively moderate beliefs, but my family is pretty far left. Anyway, I was at my cousin's wedding recently and I was talking to my uncle. He's kind of like the stereotype of that crazy uncle. And the conversation turned to Trump somehow. This was right around the assassination attempt, and he just goes, like, why do you have to miss? He was so close.
Oh?
And I just did not know how to react. I kind of froze up. I kind of always freeze up in these situations. That just seems to be my response. Um, but I want to work on that. And yeah, I would just love your advice as to how to deal with these situations, how to get my point across without sounding hostile or angry. Um, but yeah, I just think it's insanely hypocritical of the party of love, as they say, to just completely condone violence when it's against Republicans because all Republicans are hateful or whatever the logic is. I really just don't know at this point. Um, but yeah, or should I not? Maybe these people really are impossible to reason with, and I should just smile and nod. I don't know. Anyway, any advice would help. All right. Thanks.
Well, you definitely shouldn't smile and nod when they're saying stuff that's that crazy. Like, oh, what a shame he missed. Excuse me, sir? At Secret Service, we got another one to check up on. Like, I mean, he's probably harmless, but what a crazy thing to say. And you're right, to be clear, not all Democrats, not all liberals believe this kind of thing, but we've looked at polling on this podcast that shows huge percentages literally think the murder of Trump would be partially justified, at least. And that's a really scary thing to confront. So I think you're faced with a couple possibilities here. One is that you just write him off and decide he's beyond help, like beyond saving. And I can understand that, though I think that's generally something I caution against doing because I've seen people who are so far gone one way or the other actually still somehow come back to it. And the thing that you can do rather than argue with people is say to them, ask questions that plant seeds of doubt in their mind that they argue with you in the moment, but then they go home and they wrestle with it. How they don't really have a good answer to that. Perfect few questions I would have asked. Because you asked how to talk about this in a way where you remain calm and civil, even if your uncle clearly isn't. And what I would say is, okay, so you think murder is justified when you don't like the victim. What's your answer to that question? And I would say, how would you have felt if you heard Trump supporters expressing that opinion about President Biden? Silence, crickets, no good response to that. Would you really prefer Vice President J.D. Vance? Here's another question you could ask. Do you really think that killing Trump would make the American political discourse and culture move in a more stable and healthy direction? Or would it have the opposite effect of that? He might get defensive, but as long as you're just asking pointed questions and you're not yelling, you're not insulting him or anything like that, you haven't really done anything wrong. So if he throws a fit, that's on him. And I think maybe asking those kinds of questions could plant the seed of doubt that if he's at all got some rationality or logic still going on there in the back of his mind would cause him to reconsider that position later. But it's up to you if you want to engage. I would encourage you to, though, because like it is important to speak out for your values in the real world around you because you can't control what happens in Washington, D.C., but you can control what happens in your community, in your family. And you should stand up for what you believe in, especially in the face of like, he didn't state an opinion on an issue that you disagree with, right? Like he endorsed political violence and terrorism. And that's like so beyond the pale that I think you have an obligation to challenge it. I really would encourage you to. And maybe do it in the way I described to avoid, having a blow up or making a scene or anything like that. Though you may have to be willing to let him make a scene if he chooses to in that kind of context. But as long as you're not, then you don't have any reason to feel bad or feel embarrassed, honestly. But thank you for your note. Thank you for tuning in. And sorry your family members are so interesting. Up next, we're going to hear from somebody whose abuser came out as non binary because he apparently identifies as they, them or something. And now people are shaming her for not respecting his pronouns. You can't make this stuff up. We're going to take a listen to this voicemail from a listener.
Hi, Brad. I I'm just watching your new upload from Friday, June 6th. I just started the video, but a similar situation happened to me with my abuser back in my junior year of high school, which was 4 years ago. Um, he came out as non-binary, and it got him out of a lot of the trouble for the literal like entire year's worth of abuse that he put me through. And no one at school really understood when I'm like, I'm not going to call him by non-binary pronouns. I am not going to let him be seen as the victim here. And people also got upset because I was like, he does not get to go into the women's bathroom anymore. Like that's not a space that he's allowed to go in. And I actually got in trouble for refusing
Oh,
to abide by his new name and his new pronouns. And I still won't to this day. And it's not just an isolated incident with this. This happens a surprising amount where abusers will become non-binary to get out of trouble.
I'm I'm a little speechless. Like, this is diabolical. What do you mean? People disagreed with you that he's not allowed in the women's room. He's not even a woman, according to himself. That's the crazy part of that to me. I mean, everything about this is crazy, but like, he says he's non-binary, which means neither male nor female, neither woman nor man. Now, of course, that's not real. That's not a thing, but we'll talk about that another day so YouTube doesn't demonetize this video for hate speech or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, if you're not even claiming that you're a woman, why would you be allowed in the women's room? I mean, we can have the debate about whether people who claim they're women but aren't female should be allowed in. But like in this case, how is there even a discourse? How is there even a debate? He doesn't even claim to be woman. So yeah, why would he be allowed in the women's room? And if there's an assault accusation against him, which it sounds like there is, or abuse allegations, all the more reason he shouldn't be anywhere near the women's room. In fact, he should probably have an order that he can't go within 1,000 feet of that school or whatever if he's really done all these terrible things. Now, the I forget sometimes. I come from this. I come from the part of the country where at like, high schools in affluent areas, people would actually think like this. Like think you're the bad guy for misgendering someone who abused you. But at some extent, you just got to stand on business. It's your free speech. You do not have to say this. And if you have friends or administrative officials that are shaming you for not using the preferred pronouns of a non-binary person, first off, even if they're not abuser, like you don't have to do that. It's a free country. You have free speech. You have First Amendment rights. You do not have to call someone they, them if you don't agree with the belief system and ideology that undergirds that. But especially when that person is an abuser, you have no obligation to show them respect. Like, what? If these people would shame or bully you for that, I know this is like trite and oversimplification, but like they're not your real friends. I know that doesn't make it feel better. I know that doesn't change the fact that you're like losing important relationships to you or you were at the time, but they're not real friends. Real friends would be like ride or die with you if you experience something so terrible, not like thought policing and speech policing your like microaggressions against this like nonsensical ideology. No, absolutely not. And it's wild to me that I could have this episode and that where I responded to someone's story who had this experience of an abuser come out as non-binary and then receive multiple voicemails from additional people who that happened to. Now, it's not really like meaningful data because my audience is not a statistically representative sample of the population. It's a very skewed population that's not representative of the whole country. But it is interesting to me that that's like not a one-off freak occurrence. It's something multiple people have experienced just in my like relatively small audience in the grand scheme of the entire country. And That's a shame. And now, of course, I'm not saying that trans or non-binary people are all predators or all abusers or all threats to women, but it's more so actually that the like self-ID open door policies that are pushed in the name of actual trans people who are no threat to women also allow abusers to take advantage of those. That is the real point. Not that those groups of people are like actual members of those are some massive threat to people. I don't believe that. And I don't think statistics bear that out. But it's more so that bad actors, particularly male bad actors, can exploit the loopholes and the systems to actually get away with doing terrible things. And we've seen that in many incidents that have captured national news coverage and in some that haven't, like your story. But my heart goes out to you, and I'm really sorry that instead of getting supported in your community and in your school, you got this atrocious response instead. Okay, guys, that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet. Do hit that like button before you go. Comment with your thoughts. I do actually take the time to read the comments. I can't read all of them. I get too many these days, but I do love hearing what you guys have to say. If you want to send in a voicemail for an upcoming episode of Voicemail Fridays, the link to do so is in the description. Remember to also check out the merch items. The Your Delulu is showing, and On My Last Brain Cell lines are out now. And subscribe to my second channel. I'm uploading exclusive bonus content that you will not see on my main channel over there, including me reacting to like unhinged Instagram reels that aren't even political but are just creepy, and just like commentary on viral stories and political stories that I don't have time to cover on my podcast. That's only going to be on my bonus channel, so do make sure you're subscribed. And thank you to Ground News for sponsoring today's episode. And with that, we'll talk again real soon.